All right, fam. Some intro music for y'all. There we go. All right. So that was a Rosalind one hit wonder emo band 97. Rosalind's Auburn. Pretty good track. I've been listening to a lot recently. But I wanted to read some Nathaniel Hawthorne because I feel like Nathaniel Hawthorne is really slept on now. I did not like Nathaniel Hawthorne when I was younger. When I was first getting into reading literature and stuff, I much preferred Edgar Allan Poe and even Melville. But I've gotten more into Hawthorne as I've gotten older. I've learned how to appreciate him. He used to be a butt of a joke between me and my friends in college because he has this line in "The Artist of the Beautiful," which I believe I have memorized, which is the clock seemed churlishly disinclined to inform the passing wayfarer what o'clock it was, which seemed like the most Baroque way of describing the thing, but it's actually become part of myself now, that sentence, and I'll never forget it ever. So he wins in the end over all of us. Hawthorne. So this is from his collection called Mosses from an Old Manse, and it's called The Intelligence Office. That's right. So this is The Intelligence Office by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Grave figure, with a pair of mysterious spectacles on his nose and a pen behind his ear, was seated at a desk in the corner of a metropolitan office. The apartment was fitted up with a counter and furnished with an oaken cabinet and a chair or two, in simple and businesslike style. Around the walls were stuck advertisements of lost articles, or articles wanted, or articles to be disposed of, in one or another of which classes were comprehended merely all the conveniences, or otherwise, that the imagination of man has contrived. The interior of the room was thrown into shadow, partly by the tall edifices that rose on the opposite side of the street, and partly by the immense show bills of blue and crimson paper that were expanded over each of the three windows. Undisturbed by the tramp of feet, the rattle of wheels, the hump of voices, the shout of the city crier, the scream of the newsboys, and other tokens of the multitudinous life that surged along in front of the office, the figure at the desk pored diligently over a folio volume of ledger like size and aspect. He looked like the spirit of a record, the soul of his own great volume made visible in mortal shape. But scarcely an instant elapsed without the appearance at the door of some individual from the busy population whose vicinity was manifested by so much buzz and clatter and outcry. Now it was a thriving mechanic in quest of a tenement that should come within his moderate means of rent. Now a ruddy Irish girl from the banks of Killarney, wandering from kitchen to kitchen of our land while her heart still hung in the peat smoke of her native cottage. Now a single gentleman looking out for economical board, and now, for this establishment offered an epitome of worldly pursuits, it was a faded beauty inquiring for her lost bloom, or Peter Schlemmel for his lost shadow, or an author of 10 years' standing for his vanished reputation, or a moody man for yesterday's sunshine. At the next lifting of the latch, there entered a person with his hat awry upon his head, his clothes perversely ill suited to his form, his eyes staring in directions opposite to their intelligence, and a certain odd unsuitableness pervading his whole figure. Wherever he might chance to be, whether in palace or cottage, church or market, on land or sea, or even at his own fireside, he must have worn the characteristic expression of a man out of his right place. This, inquired he, putting his question in the form of an assertion, this is the Central Intelligence Office? Even so, answered the figure at the desk, turning another leaf of his volume. He then looked the applicant in the face and said briefly, your business? I want, said the latter with tremulous earnestness, a place. A place? And of what nature? Asked the intelligencer. There are many vacant or soon to be so, some of which will probably suit, since they range from that of a footman up to seat at the council board, or in the cabinet, or a throne, or a presidential chair. The stranger stood pondering before the desk with an unquiet, dissatisfied air, a dull, vague pain of heart expressed by a slight contortion of the brow, an earnestness of glance that asked and expected, yet continually wavered, as if distrusting. In short, he evidently wanted not in a physical or intellectual sense, but with an urgent moral necessity that is hardest of all things to satisfy, since it knows not its own object. Ah, you mistake me, said he at length, with a gesture of nervous impatience. Either of the places you mention, indeed, might answer my purpose, or, more probably, none of them. I want my place, my own place, my true place in the world, my proper sphere, my thing to do, which nature intended me to perform when she fashioned me thus awry, and which I have vainly sought all my lifetime. Whether it be a footman's duty or a king's is of little consequence, so it be naturally mine. Can you help me here? I will enter your application, answered the intelligencer, at the same time writing a few lines in his volume. But to undertake such a business, I tell you frankly, is quite apart from the ground covered by my official duties. Ask for something specific, and it may doubtless be negotiated for you on your compliance with the conditions. But were I to go further, I should have the whole population of the city upon my shoulders, since far the greater proportion of them are, more or less, in your predicament. The applicant sank into a fit of despondency and passed out of the door without again lifting his eyes. And if he died of the disappointment, he was probably buried in the wrong tomb, inasmuch as the fatality of such people never deserts them, and whether alive or dead, they are invariably out of place. Almost immediately, another foot was heard on the threshold. A youth entered hastily and threw a glance around the office to ascertain whether the man of intelligence was alone. He then approached close to the desk, blushed like a maiden, and seemed at a loss how to broach his business. You come upon an affair of the heart, said the official personage, looking into him through his mysterious spectacles. State it in as few words as may be. You are right, replied the youth. I have a heart to dispose of. You seek an exchange, said the intelligencer. Foolish youth, why not be contented with your own? Because, exclaimed the young man, losing his embarrassment in a passionate glow, because my heart burns with an intolerable fire. It tortures me all day long with yearnings for I know not what, and feverish throbbings and the pangs of a vague sorrow. And it awakens me in the night time with a quake, when there is nothing to be feared. I cannot endure it any longer. If it were wiser to throw away such a heart, even if it brings me nothing in return. Oh, very well, said the man of office, making an entry in his volume. Your affair will be easily transacted. This species of brokerage makes no inconsiderable part of my business, and there is always a large assortment of the article to select from. Here, if I mistake not, comes a pretty fair sample. Even as he spoke, the door was gently and slowly thrust ajar, affording a glimpse of the slender figure of a young girl, who, as she timidly entered, seemed to bring the light and cheerfulness of the outer atmosphere into the somewhat gloomy apartment. We know not her errand there, nor can we reveal whether the young man gave up his heart into her custody. If so, the arrangement was neither better nor worse than in 99 cases out of 100, where the parallel sensibilities of a similar age and portionate affections, and the easy satisfaction of characters not deeply conscious of themselves, supply the place of any profounder sympathy. Not always, however, was the agency of the passions and affections an office of so little trouble. It happened rarely, indeed, in proportion to the cases that came under an ordinary rule, but still it did happen that a heart was occasionally brought hither of such exquisite material, so delicately attempered, and so curiously wrought that no other heart could be found to match it. It might almost be considered a misfortune, in a worldly point of view, to be the possessor of such a diamond of the purest water, since in any reasonable probability it could only be exchanged for an ordinary pebble, or a bit of cunningly manufactured glass, or, at least, for a jewel of native richness, but ill set or with some fatal flaw, or an earthy vein running through its central luster. To choose another figure, it is said that hearts which have their wellspring in the infinite and contain inexhaustible sympathies should ever be doomed to pour themselves into shallow vessels and thus lavish their rich affections on the ground. Strange that the finer and deeper nature, whether in man or woman, while possessed of every other delicate instinct, should so often lack that most invaluable one of preserving itself from contamination with what is of a baser kind. Sometimes, it is true, the spiritual fountain is kept pure by a wisdom within itself and sparkles into the light of heaven without a stain from the earthly strata through which it had gushed upwards. And sometimes, even here on earth, The pure mingles with the pure, and the inexhaustible is recompensed with the infinite. But these miracles, those who should claim the credit of them, are far beyond the scope of such a superficial agent in human affairs as the figure in the mysterious spectacles. Again, the door was opened, admitting the bustle of the city with a fresher reverberation into the intelligence office. Now entered a man of woe begone and downcast look. It was such an aspect as if he had lost the very soul out of his body and had traversed all the world over, searching in the dust of the highways and along the shady footpaths and beneath the leaves of the forest and among the sands of the seashore in hopes to recover it again. He had bent an anxious glance along the pavement of the street as he came hitherward. He looked also in the angle of the doorstep and upon the floor of the room, and finally, coming up to the man of intelligence, he gazed through the inscrutable spectacles which the latter wore, as if the lost treasure might be hidden within his eyes. I have lost, he began, and then he paused. Yes, said the intelligencer, I see that you have lost. But what? I have lost a precious jewel, replied the unfortunate person, the like of which is not to be found among any prince's treasures. While I possessed it, the contemplation of it was my sole and sufficient happiness. No price should have purchased it for me, but it has fallen from my bosom where I wore it in my careless wanderings about the city. After causing the stranger to describe the marks of his lost jewel, the intelligencer opened a drawer of the oaken cabinet which had been mentioned as forming a part of the furniture of the room. Here were deposited whatever articles had been picked up in the streets until the right owner should claim them. It was a strange and heterogeneous collection. Not the least remarkable part of it was a great number of wedding rings, each one of which had been riveted upon the finger with holy vows and all the mystic potency that the most solemn rites could attain, but had nevertheless proved too slippery for the wearer's vigilance. The gold of some was worn thin, betokening the attrition of years of wedlock. Others, glittering from the jeweler's shop, must have been lost within the honeymoon. There were ivory tablets, the leaves scribbled over with sentiments that had been the deepest truths of the writer's earlier years, which were now quite obliterated from his memory. So scrupulously were articles preserved in this depository that not even withered flowers were rejected. White roses and blush roses and moss roses, fit emblems of virgin purity and shamefacedness, which had been lost or flung away and trampled into the pollution of the streets. Locks of hair, the golden and the glossy dark, the long tresses of woman, and the treasure place, and the crisp curls of man signified that lovers were now and then so heedless of the faith entrusted to them as to drop its symbol from the treasure place of the bosom. Many of these things were imbued with perfumes, and perhaps a sweet scent had departed from the lives of their former possessors ever since they had so wilfully or negligently lost them. Here were gold pencil cases, little ruby hearts with golden arrows through them, bosom pins, pieces of coin, and small articles of every description, comprising nearly all that have been lost since a long time ago. Most of them, doubtless, had a history and a meaning, if there were time to search it out and room to tell it. Whoever has missed anything valuable, whether out of his heart, mind, or pocket, would do well to make inquiry at the Central Intelligence Office. And in the corner of one of the drawers of the oaken cabinet, after considerable research, was found a great pearl, looking like the soul of celestial purity, congealed and polished. There is my jewel, my very pearl, cried the stranger, almost beside himself with rapture. It is mine! Give it me this moment, or I shall perish! I perceive, said the man of intelligence, examining it more closely, that this is the pearl of great price. The very same, answered the stranger. Judge then of my misery at losing it out of my bosom. Restore it to me. I must not live without it an instant longer. Pardon me, rejoined the intelligencer calmly. You ask what is beyond my duty. This pearl, as you well know, is held upon a peculiar tenure, and having once let it escape from your keeping, you have no greater claim to it, nay, not so great, as any other person. I cannot give it back. Nor could the entreaties of the miserable man, who saw before his eyes the jewel of his life, without the power to reclaim it, soften the heart of this stern being, impassive to human sympathy, though exercising such an apparent influence over human fortunes. Finally, the loser of the inestimable pearl clutched his hands among his hair and ran madly forth into the world, which was affrighted at his desperate looks. there passed him on the doorstep a fashionable young gentleman whose business was to inquire for a damask rosebud, the gift of his lady love, which he had lost out of his buttonhole within an hour after receiving it. So various were the errands of those who visited this central office, where all human wishes seemed to be made known, and so far as destiny would allow, negotiated to their fulfillment. The next that entered was a man beyond the middle age, bearing the look of one who knew the world and his own course in it. He had just alighted from a handsome private carriage, which he had ordered to wait in the street while its owner transacted his business. This person came up to the desk with a quick, determined step, and looked the intelligencer in the face with a resolute eye, though, at the same time, some certain secret trouble gleamed from it in red and dusky light. "I have an estate to dispose of," said he, with a brevity that seemed characteristic. "Describe it," said the intelligencer. The applicant proceeded to give the boundaries of his property, its nature, comprising tillage, pasture, woodland, and pleasure grounds, in ample circuit, together with a mansion house, in the construction of which it had been his object to realize a castle in the air, hardening its shadowy walls into granite and rendering its visionary splendor perceptible to the awakened eye. Judging from his description, it was beautiful enough to vanish like a dream, yet substantial enough to endure for centuries. He spoke, too, of the gorgeous furniture, the refinements of upholstery, and all the luxurious artifices that combined to render this a residence where life might flow onward in a stream of golden days, undisturbed by the ruggedness which fate loves to fling into it. "I am a man of strong will," said he, in conclusion, "and at my first setting out in life as a poor, unfriended youth, I resolved to make myself the possessor of such a mansion and estate as this, together with the abundant revenue necessary to uphold it. I have succeeded to the extent of my utmost wish, and this is the estate which I have now concluded to dispose of." "And your terms?" asked the intelligencer, after taking down the particulars with which the stranger had supplied him. "Easy, abundantly easy," answered the successful man, smiling, with a stern and almost frightful contraction of the brow, as if to quell an inward pang. "I have been engaged in various sorts of business, a distiller, a trader to Africa, an East India merchant, a speculator in the stocks, and, in the course of these affairs, have contracted an encumbrance of a certain nature. The purchaser of the estate shall merely be required to assume this burden to himself." "I understand you," said the man of intelligence, putting his pen behind his ear. "I fear that no bargain can be negotiated on these conditions. Very probably the next possessor may acquire the estate with a similar encumbrance, but it will be of his own contracting, and will not lighten your burden in the least." "And am I to live on," fiercely exclaimed the stranger, "with the dirt of these accursed acres and the granite of this infernal mansion crushing down my soul? How, if I should turn the edifice into an almshouse or a hospital, or tear it down, or build a church?" "You can at least make the experiment," said the intelligencer, "but the whole matter is one which you must settle for yourself." The man of deplorable success withdrew, and got into his coach, which rattled off lightly over the wooden pavements, though laden with the weight of much land, a stately house, and ponderous heaps of gold, all compressed into an evil conscience. There now appeared many applicants for places, among the most noteworthy of whom was a small, smoke-dried figure, who gave himself out to be one of the bad spirits that had waited upon Dr. Faustus in his laboratory. He pretended to show a certificate of character, which, he averred, had been given him by that famous necromancer, and countersigned by several masters whom he had subsequently served. "I am afraid, my good friend," observed the intelligencer, "that your chance of getting a service is but poor. Nowadays, men act the evil spirit for themselves and their neighbors, and play the part more effectually than 99 out of 100 in your fraternity." But just as the poor fiend was assuming a vaporous consistency, being about to vanish through the floor in sad disappointment and chagrin, the editor of a political newspaper chanced to enter the office in quest of a scribbler of party paragraphs. The former servant of Dr. Faustus, with some misgivings as to his sufficiency of venom, was allowed to try his hand in this capacity. Next appeared, likewise seeking a service, the mysterious man in red, who had aided Bonaparte in his ascent to imperial power. He was examined as to his qualifications by any aspiring politician, but finally rejected as lacking familiarity with the cunning tactics of the present. People continued to succeed each other with as much briskness as if everybody turned aside out of the roar and tumult of the city to record here some want or superfluity or desire. Some had goods or possessions of which they wished to negotiate the sale. A China merchant had lost his health by a long residence in the wasting climate. He very liberally offered his laurels. He very liberally offered his disease, rather, and his wealth along with it, to any physician who would rid him of both together. A soldier offered his wreath of laurels for as good a leg as that which had cost him on the battlefield. One poor weary wretch desired nothing but to be accommodated with any creditable method of laying down his life, for misfortune and pecuniary troubles had so subdued his spirits that he could no longer conceive the possibility of happiness, nor had the heart to try for it. Nevertheless, happening to overhear some conversations in the intelligence office respecting wealth to be rapidly accumulated by a certain mode of speculation, he resolved to live out this one other experiment of better fortune. Many persons desired to exchange their youthful vices for others better suited to the gravity of advancing age. A few, we are glad to say, made earnest efforts to exchange vice for virtue, and, hard as the bargain was, succeeded in effecting it. But it was remarkable that what all were the least willing to give up, even on the most advantageous terms, were the habits, the oddities, the characteristic traits, the little ridiculous indulgences, somewhere between faults and follies, of which nobody but themselves could understand the fascination. The great folio in which the man of intelligence recorded all these freaks of idle hearts and aspirations of deep hearts and desperate longings of miserable hearts and evil prayers of perverted hearts would be curious reading were it possible to obtain it for publication. Human character in its individual developments, human nature in the mass, may best be suited in its wishes, and this was the record of them all. There was an endless diversity of mode and circumstance, yet withal such a similarity in the real groundwork that any one page of the volume, whether written in the days before the flood, or the yesterday that has just gone by, or to be written on the morrow that is close at hand, or 1,000 ages hence, might serve as a specimen of the whole. Not but that there were wild sallies of fantasy that could scarcely occur to more than one man's brain, whether reasonable or lunatic, the strangest wishes, yet most incident to men who had gone deep into scientific pursuits and attained a high intellectual stage, though not the loftiest, were to contend with nature and wrest from her some secret or some power which he had been fit to withhold from mortal grasp. She loves to delude her aspiring students and mock them with mysteries that seem just beyond their utmost reach, to concoct new minerals, to produce new forms of vegetable life, to create an insect. If nothing higher in the living scale is a sort of wish that is often reveled in the breast of a man of science. An astronomer, who lived far more among the distant worlds of space than in this lower sphere, recorded a wish to behold the opposite side of the moon, which, unless the system of the firmament be reversed, she can never turn towards the earth. On the other, on the same page of the volume was written the wish of a little child to have the stars for playthings. The most ordinary wish that was written down with wearisome recurrence was, of course, for wealth, 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 in sums from a few shillings up to unreckable thousands. But in reality, this often repeated expression covered as many different desires. Wealth is the golden essence of the outward world, embodying almost everything that exists beyond the limits of the soul, and therefore it is the natural yearning for the life in the midst of which we find ourselves, and of which gold is the condition of enjoyment that men abridge into the general wish. Here and there, it is true, the volume testified to some heart so perverted as to desire gold for its own sake. Many wished for power, a strange desire indeed, since it is but another form of slavery. Old people wished for the delights of youth, a fop for a fashionable coat, an idle reader for a new novel, a versifier for a rhyme to some stubborn word, a painter for Titian's secret of coloring, a prince for a cottage, a republican for a kingdom and a palace, a libertine for his neighbor's wife, a man of palate for green peas, and a poor man for a crust of bread. The ambitious desires of public men elsewhere so craftily concealed were here expressed openly and boldly, side by side with the unselfish wishes of the philanthropist for the welfare of the race, so beautiful, so comforting in contrast with the egotism that continually weighed self against the world. Into the darker secrets of the Book of Wishes we will not penetrate. It would be an instructive employment for a student of mankind, perusing this volume carefully and comparing its records with men's perfected designs as expressed in their deeds in daily life, to ascertain how far the one accorded with the other. Undoubtedly, in most cases, the correspondence would be found remote. The holy and generous wish that rises like incense from a pure heart towards heaven often lavishes its sweet perfume on the blast of evil times. The foul, selfish, murderous wish that stems forth from a corrupted heart often passes into the spiritual atmosphere without being concentrated into an earthly deed. Yet this volume is probably truer as a representation of the human heart than is the living drama of action as it evolves around us. There's more of good and more of evil in it, more redeeming points of the bad and more errors of the virtuous, higher upsoarings and baser degradations of the soul. In short, a more perplexing amalgamation of vice and virtue than we witness in the outward world. Decency and external conscience often produce a far fairer outside than is warranted by the stains within. And be it owned, oil the other hand, that a man seldom repeats to his nearest friend, any more than he realizes in act, the purest wishes which, at some blessed time or other, have arisen from the depths of his nature and witnessed for him in this volume. Yet there is enough on every leaf to make the good man shudder for his own wild and idle wishes, as well as for the sinner whose whole life is the incarnation of a wicked desire. But again the door is opened, and we hear the tumultuous stir of the world, a deep and awful sound, expressing in another form some portion of what is written in volume that lies before the man of intelligence. A grandfatherly personage tottered hastily into the office with such an earnestness in his infirm alacrity that his white hair floated backwards as he hurried up to the desk, while his dim eyes caught a momentary luster from his vehemence of purpose. This venerable figure explained that he was in search of tomorrow. I've spent all my life in pursuit of it, added the sage old gentleman, being assured that tomorrow has some vast benefit or other in store for me. But I am now getting a little in years, and must make haste, for unless I overtake tomorrow soon, I begin to be afraid it will finally escape me. This fugitive tomorrow, my venerable friend, said the man of intelligence, is a stray child of time and is flying from his father into the region of the infinite. Continue your pursuit, and you will doubtless come up with him. But as to the earthly gifts which you expect, you scatter them all among a throng of yesterdays. Obliged to content himself with this enigmatical response, the grandsire hastened forth with a click clatter of his staff upon the floor, and as he disappeared, a little boy scampered through the door in chase of a butterfly which had gone astray amid the barren sunshine of the city. Had the older gentleman been shrewder, he might have detected tomorrow under the semblance of that gaudy insect. The golden butterfly glistened through the shadowy apartment and brushed its wings against the book of wishes and fluttered forth again with the child still in pursuit. A man now entered in neglected attire with the aspect of a thinker, but somewhat too rough hewn and brawny for a scholar. His face was full of a sturdy vigor, with some finer and keener attribute beneath. Though harsh at first, it was tempered with the glow of a large, warm heart, which had force enough to heat his powerful intellect through and through. He advanced to the intelligencer and looked at him with a glance of such stern sincerity that perhaps few secrets were beyond its scope. "I seek for truth," said he. "It is precisely the most rare pursuit that has ever come under my cognizance," replied the intelligencer, as he made the new inscription in his volume. "Most men seek to impose some cunning falsehood upon themselves for truth, but I can lend no help to your researches. You must achieve the miracle for yourself. At some fortunate moment, you may find truth at your side, and perhaps you may mistily discern far in advance or possibly behind you." "Not behind me," said the seeker, "for I have nothing left on my track without a thorough investigation. She flits before me, passing now through a naked solitude, and now mingling with the throng of a popular assembly, and now writing with the pen of a French philosopher, and now standing at the altar of an old cathedral in the guise of a Catholic priest performing the high mass. Oh, weary search! But I must falter not, and surely my heart deep quest of truth shall avail at last." He paused and fixed his eyes upon the intelligencer with a depth of investigation that seemed to hold commerce with the inner nature of this being, wholly regardless of his external development. "And what are you?" said he. "It will not satisfy me to point to this fantastic show of an intelligence office and this mockery of business. Tell me, what is beneath it, and what your real agency in life and your influence upon mankind?" "Yours is a mind," answered the man of intelligence, "before which the forms and fantasies that conceal the inner idea from the multitude vanish at once and leave the naked reality beneath. Know, then, the secret. My agency in worldly action, my connection with the press and tumult and intermingling and development of human affairs is merely delusive. The desire of man's hearts does for him whatever I seem to do. I am no minister of action, but the recording spirit." What further secrets were then spoken remains a mystery, inasmuch as the roar of the city, the bustle of human business, the outcry of the jostling masses, the rush and tumult of man's life, in its noisy and brief career, arose so high that it drowned the words of these two talkers. And whether they stood taking talking in the moon, or in Vanity Fair, or in a city of this actual world, is more than I can say. God fucking damn. What a fucking story. Ugh. It's all there. It's all fucking there. That's it. That's the whole thing. You could end right there. This is just one. He wrote so many fucking bangers, guys. No one, who you fucking want to read The New Yorker? What are you gonna pick up? The new Mossbag bullshit? Fucking read your Hawthorne. Read your Nathaniel fucking Hawthorne. The way that slowly, it's a Gogolian. The only person you can compare like Hawthorne Poe is Gogol. He had the same ability to do this, and Dostoevsky in his short stories and parts of his work, which is to fit you in what seems to be a real circumstance. And the intelligence office is a real thing that did exist, and Hawthorne actually worked for it, so he knows what this sort of business really is. Um, it's the intelligence office. It's calling 411. It's Google. It's the internet. It's fate. We're all. I'm a clerk in the intelligence office right now, waiting for the guy who's coming in to looking for the truth. In the end. But he starts off in this moment. It just seems like a tale about town, and it's the guy who looks like he's out of place. It's like and then you made the jump from this immediate realistic almost scenario, kind of a low mimetic fiction, into this uncanny realm of the parable of like a folk tale, because it's not just, it's a man who is looking for his place because he is the man who is out of place, and he looks out of place. He'll be out of place, and Hawthorne just riffs on this for as long as he can. He pulls everything out of the conceit of this singular setting of the intelligence office and people going to record their wishes and desires to find the things that are lost, the lost and found, the same kind of idea here. The search. This is the search bar, you could call it today, right? If you wrote this story today to get it published in McSweeney's, you'd have to write it in this insufferably twee manner. And it would be about the search bar. And it would be a bar where people go to talk about they talk their Google searches to the bartender. And you could even, this story fucking plays itself out. It's already less grounded and real than what Hawthorne was writing fucking over a century ago. Like, this is better. This already talks about everything today. Well, the Book of Wishes, who the intelligence officer who gets to read the Book of Wishes. Who has the Book of Wishes, I ask you? Who can, if they so chose, audit all of the searches, the internet searches, the internet history, the browsing history of everyone? This could be said at the NSA, like the NSA agent at the search bar. That's what this story's about. It's like so far fucking ahead of its time. It's timeless. And that's he said this is what it all leads up to, is that this situation seems like this aspect of bureaucratic modernity, this like sorting of everything, the accounting of everything, this commercialization, the real, like the triumph of capital, which was even described here, where capital is everything that's beyond the soul. Like, what could a soul desire for? Your soul desires for things you cannot buy with money. So when you desire like anything beyond that, you're desiring capital. That's all capital. This is all here, all in this one beautiful little story, which nobody talks about. You will not get this story assigned to you in college. You will not get this story assigned to you in high school, and it won't be assigned to you when you take your creative writing class and they give you the supposed best of list of American short stories. This isn't collected. Nobody's telling you to read this. Why? Why? It's more applicable, it's more modern, it's more avant-garde than anything else that you're going to get assigned to you. You read The Scarlet Letter. Can you imagine assigning The Scarlet Letter? Like, The Scarlet Letter is great, don't get me wrong. People don't understand it. It's misread entirely and mistaught entirely. And it took me a long time to realize that, and to realize that Hawthorne is the genius that he is, because we don't know how to appreciate this type of American literature. It's so stern. It's very pared down. Like, he's not really. This isn't even flourishy for a Hawthorne story. He's not really indulging himself like in like the Blithedale Romance or the Marble Fawn. But this is American style fiction. This is like Republican fiction. This is the type of story it is, where it takes the commonplace and raises it to the level of a collective myth. It raises it to the level of folklore and fantasy and myth. That's the whole point. It's to take the mundane, the everyday lives, and to lift it beyond just the realm of social fiction, but into the realm of parable and wisdom literature, which is what this is about. Because what is the recording spirit? The recording spirit is a very esoteric biblical entity, right? You'll see William Blake writes about the recording spirit. The Kabbalists will talk about the recording spirit. That's the spirit that's keeping record of all of these things, That's what's his name? It has a name in the Kabbalah, where it has a mouth and eyes and a tongue and ears for like every person that has ever existed. It's just like the record of our deeds, the Book of Wishes, etc. All of these different things pulled together. But the whole point being that these types of myths have a material basis. They're not just immaterial either. That's the beautiful marriage in this like dark romantic, modernistic literature, is that it marries this tradition to the real. By elevating what is real to the level of myth, it discloses a more transcendental, absolute reality within the wrappings, the shell of it all. That is what it means to make like an art for the common. Like, this story it's like a Bob Dylan song. It's dealing with like archetypal types of images, lost treasures, lost jewels, where even when it's being particular about its own socioeconomic time period, right? Like you could like he was an East India man. This is like that character is like an investment banker, like he's like a venture capitalist or whatever, and he's like, I need to get rid of this mansion that I built. It's weighing on my fucking soul. All of these characters, like they're characters that they're not sketched out enough to be like realistic characters. They're not psychologically rendered in that sense. Like Hawthorne is brilliant at doing that in other instances, but that this type of story was something that would be serial, like was printed like in magazines and things before he collected it into his collection. But this was the type of shit. This was what everyone was going off about. Like Hawthorne was extremely popular across the whole world because he wrote so fucking well. It's just worth reading. Especially it's cold. It's a cold October morning here, October afternoon, I suppose. Overcast, such that the sun, through all of the diffuse clouds which cover the entirety of everything, makes everything very picturesque. It's like the perfect light for photography. Is this overcast white sky? It's like why they put up those screens, the white screens for the light when you see photography being done in a professional way. It gives everything this sort of hue in this sort of light. It's the sort of light that I feel Hawthorne casts on things. Hawthorne keeps the sun hidden behind the veil of clouds. He writes overcast prose. It's overcast with something. All right. I'm going to start talking to some other people about it. If anyone's got thoughts, etc. What's up, Balaam? You're on. Let me take a sip of my polar blueberry lemonade here.
What's up? That was an awesome story, man.
Isn't it? Man, it
Yeah,
kills me.
and you're right. I went through a fucking English literature program, and never once did they put Hawthorne in front of me like that.
No, they won't. Like it's the
The
case with
travesty.
everything though. But like that's the thing is like that's what the story is about too though, which is that like, you go to these intelligence agencies, right? And you're like, "Hey, give me a fucking banger of an American short story." And they're going to give you what? If you're going to get a Hawthorne one, they're going to give you like Young Goodman Brown. They're going to give you one that is good. Like don't get me wrong, that's a great story. They'll give you like the ones that are always collected and anthologized over and over and over again, and they've come to have like a certain like famous short stories that are famous for being famous short stories. You read like Shirley Jackson's The Lottery or whatever. I read that short story
Yeah,
maybe like 18 fucking times because it gets assigned every single time as like, this is a great short story. But this one is it's too peculiar for that. Like I could
yeah,
some people I can imagine would have no idea what to do with this.
yeah. I can't stick around very long. I am at work right now, but what it sparked in me was did you ever read Thomas Ligotti?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, he's like
great kind of American like gothic post Lovecraft, post Poe sort of horror, but verging on comedy.
yeah,
Sort of
he's like
reminded me of
he's
this.
like a profound like Ligotti's definitely more pessimistic, definitely more of a tragic
Yeah,
pessimist than this. But
yeah,
because Hawthorne is ultimately like he's like a transcendental optimist in that sense. Like he does
right.
he actually has faith,
Yeah,
his
kind we haven't had in like more than 100 years.
yeah, exactly. That's like, but like he has a faith that's like tempered by all of the tragedies of life. Like he has no not like a self deluding faith, but like he has faith in
Mm.
the truth, like the truth, no matter what it is, the truth to the end, and that's all he's trying
Right.
to render.
Even in this setting, even in this pitiable setting, right? Truth shines through, and he's got those insights throughout. Like the what was it like? Wealth is just the like expression of the outside world, or I can't remember how he phrased it, but it's like, oh shit,
It's
that
like
just like shines
it's
through.
right where the soul ends. Like all that you like, if
Yeah,
you like want money, like yeah, I need money in order to do. It's like everything where the soul ends. Like
yeah,
like beyond that. It's the
yeah,
fallen
yeah.
world in itself.
Yeah. So, like I said, I got to take off, but amazing story. Definitely inspired me to touch more on Hawthorne. So, thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for popping on, putting in your 2 cents.
Right. Bye, guys.
All right. Anyone else? Otherwise, I'm just gonna ramp it up, guys. I know one of y'all's got thoughts. Well, it's good if it's good either way. I got a lot of shit I want to get done today, so I hope you all enjoyed. Pass it around. I'm gonna pin this one real quick. Peace.